right, good morning. And it's the top of the morning on a beautiful Tuesday morning here in Southern California where it's about to rain. But we're going to, I'm going to cut to the chase. So today we have a quadrant of people that are on the show. But this story is pretty much, I want to be able to honor Lieutenant Colonel Stu Scheller. And without further ado, I want to bring the proud parents of Lieutenant Colonel Scheller. That would be Cathy Scheller and Stu Scheller Sr. on top and right there. We got Ben Owen, president, founder of Black Rifle Company. We have Robert, right? And Robert, where are you from again? Flanders Field?
That's correct.
All right. And we have Rocco as supporting guest, right?
Correct.
Yep. What is your main purpose there, Rocco?
So I work in the private equity space. We raise capital and deploy it to companies in the social impact space, ESG, right. Clean energy.
Okay.
And that's our main focus.
All right, and then we got Mariel. And Mariel, we respect your privacy. Just chime in if you can hear us. Apparently not. Okay, thank you. So without further ado, this program is really geared for Lieutenant Colonel Scheller's supporting parents. And we want to talk about them specifically. Cathy and Stu are from the Midwest in Cincinnati. They've been supporting their son for 40-something years, correct? He's been in the Marine Corps for 17 years. And in the last 3.5 months, well, we can go since August, the situation, a lot of people don't understand the true version of what's going on behind the backstory. And we have a lot of people and components that are supporting that. And then we want you to be able to share your story with respect to Lieutenant Colonel Stu Scheller, because he has a gag order. So we're going to make sure that that's pretty honored on that way. But please, Cathy, we'll start with you and then with Stu Sr. All right, Cathy, go ahead.
Okay. Oh, just go? Well,
let's go, Cathy.
Of Lieutenant Colonel Stu Scheller, and if you are unaware, which seems amazing to us that there are still people out there that do not know this story, but there are quite a few. On August 26th, as the exit at the airport in Afghanistan, Stewart had been in the Marine Corps for 17 years, a lieutenant colonel. And he had just seen it come full circle, I believe, from his first deployment until those photos at Abbey Gate. And he just took a stand, posted a video saying he could not agree with, he was asking his leaders, military leaders, to please take accountability for what happened. The men in the field to the right and to the left have always done what they needed to do. And they weren't at fault here. And he was asking someone to take accountability for the debauched exit and for leaving people behind, and for our 13 service members killed and our 18 service members that were injured, and on and on. He just called for accountability. And it was a good, strong, solid message. We have 22 to 35 suicides per day from our military that have served and retired. We don't want that. And he didn't want that. And so his call for accountability was to save lives and to make a change in the system and to let the person to the right and the left of you when you're fighting, knowing that it did matter. And he subsequently got removed from his command, and we went into a spiral after that. And 30 days later, when they put him in the brig and imprisoned him, his father and I started speaking out because he has had a gag order since then. And I'll leave it at that so someone else can talk.
Well, I will say, so the initial story was a demand for accountability. And again, I think most people, at least that are listening here today, or will be listening in the future to this podcast, have probably heard his demand for accountability. What you may not know is the series of events that happened to Lieutenant Colonel Scheller after his demand for accountability. I would encourage you, if you want to understand what his command did to him, how they reacted to his command, his demand, you can go to istandwithstu.com. It's a website that Cathy and I brought up Actually, our daughter did. And it is, you can read Stewart's statement that he read to the court-martial judge on October 14th. It's a very powerful, it's a long but powerful statement of how they reacted to his demanding accountability. It's a sad, shameful story, if you ask me, and if you've heard me tell it, but it will tell you what our son has had to deal with for the last 3 months. So while in prison, they agreed to a plea deal whereby he would accept guilt for charges brought against him, which he did. He's the only one that stood up for accountability. And in return, they agreed to give him a letter of reprimand, which he was expecting, as well as they agreed to sign off on his resignation with an honorable or a general under honorable conditions. That was October 15th. The plea deal was actually reached before that. So it has now been 2 months, and they have slow walked their part in signing resignation. And I'm asked 100 times a week, why do you think they're doing that? Well, either they are incredibly inefficient, which I don't think they're that inefficient. They're our military. I have seen them move incredibly fast and stealth when they want to. So, or they want to keep him quiet. And we think it's probably the latter, but he's going to get out eventually. It could be up to 3 years if they choose not to sign it. We're hopeful. That, our understanding is it might actually be in the Pentagon this week with the lawyers in the Pentagon, and so hopefully it'll reach General Berger's desk and Secretary Carlos Del Toro's desk for signature, so we can get this ugly chapter behind us.
So I want to thank you, Mr. Scheller, on that. And Ben, let's talk about how you've been able to support and how you come into the picture. And from that point, I'll circle to Rob, okay?
Sure, absolutely. So as Black Rifle, we got pulled into the Afghanistan evacuation on August 16th. I was actually on a video call with one of the families we were trying to evacuate at the Abbey Gate bomb. I saw it in real time. Pretty much the entire evacuation effort is mostly veterans. It's obviously all volunteers. And right around the time his video came out, we were pretty much hitting an emotional brick wall. Many of us had been up for 2 days straight trying to get people out of the gates. I think the washout rate at that point was, hitting a precipice that if we didn't come back from, everybody's going to give up. We still hadn't lost HKIA, so there was still a viable route to get people evacuated, but everybody was getting ready to give up. And on the 26th, when Lieutenant Colonel Scheller's video came out, within minutes, it was all over every single Signal chat, WhatsApp chat. It was everywhere. Everybody in the evacuation saw it. Within an hour of it dropping. I can't even fathom how many of the social media shares probably came from people involved in the evacuation effort. So I understand his intent was a multi-pronged, looking for accountability, preventing suicides, ending the moral trauma over this. But the immediate effect that his speech had was it kept a lot of the volunteers going, which, without a doubt led to an immeasurable number of lives being saved of our Afghan allies, because the volunteer effort was essentially rallied by that. And it started a push that kept a lot of us going for, I think I was up 54 or 56 hours straight. I think the last time I tried to add it up after his video came out, an additional 7,500 Afghans were evacuated. That's not a small number at all. And, to speak to the suicide, you mentioned, Cathy, 22 to 35 a day. We found in Flanders Fields, we're more on that 35 a day because we know that, unintentional or intentional overdoses do not count in that. And many veterans do choose an overdose to end their life. And that doesn't get counted in the 22 a day. Since the evacuation or the fall of Afghanistan, the withdrawal, the defeat, however you word it, the calls to the crisis centers have gone through the roof. With the southern border as wide open as it is, we have vast quantities of fentanyl in the streets, which is leading to more accidental overdoses with veterans being disproportionately affected. So I think for everybody involved, I don't care what level of, combat trauma or moral injury you have, to see somebody in military leadership stand up and demand accountability like your son did, it goes a very long way for a lot of us. On the flip side of that, if we're going to speak to the evacuation effort, I think all of us involved are incredibly disgusted and dismayed that the only person held accountable to date in our military for what's going on is the one man who spoke up and demanded accountability. That's unacceptable to me. It's unacceptable to anybody, that ever wore a uniform. I don't understand how this is where we're at as a nation right now. I really don't.
Awesome, Ben. Cathy, Stu, do you have any response to what Ben just stated?
I did not know that those overdoses were not counted in that number. I have heard from many mental health professionals that number is at least the 35, if not higher. But I'm trying to go by the numbers put out by the military as well. So I know it's a wide range, but we know it's unacceptable.
I will react. I will react to your comment, Ben. Since August 26, when Stuart first spoke, he did not want to make this political. He wanted to keep it real simple. Our senior military leaders need to accept accountability, admit mistakes, learn from mistakes. But we all know now that we have seen the emperor without clothes, that it is political. And all I can say, and you're right, it's shameful, it's awful. My purpose for the next 3 years will be to get people to vote for change in 2022 and 2024. I think it will be a red tsunami.
All right, Robert, you're up to bat. So let's talk about what Flanders Fields does and how's your correlation with the Schellers and with Ben. Go for it, my man.
Yeah, I think the most inspiring part of watching this whole situation unfold with Lieutenant Colonel Scheller was that, to Ben's point, he is the only person who's been held to any degree of accountability, and it's for a non-issue. That's the frustration that we see, because on our side, we're trying to figure out how to open up the bottleneck that these bureaucrats have created. Right? There are literally lives on the line, but because we don't have the right paper pushers in place, people can't get out. And we're not talking about, random strangers. We're talking about folks that stood and fought for 20 years with people just like Colonel Scheller. And when I say 20 years, I mean that very literally. In some cases, they're individuals who can't get their immediate family out, and they were deployed for over a decade straight. And for us at Flanders, it's unacceptable, right? We founded Flanders to support our veteran and the homelessness and addiction rampant within our veteran population. But we look at this as an extension of that outreach. And what we want to do is try to find out who we can make accountable for this. Because I guarantee you it's not Lieutenant Colonel Scheller, right? There's plenty of people who are in a position to save lives. But we are in many cases actively dissuading other nations from helping out when they could. And all the infrastructure's in place. Doesn't even take any tax dollars to make it happen. But our administration today, right, wrong, or indifferent, red or blue, is not allowing that to happen. And we don't know why. And as Flanders Fields, we want to understand the why. And we want to figure out how to break that cycle and get these folks to the safety that they so desperately earned.
So, Stuart and Cathy, what do you think about what Robert's is sharing with you and how that correlates with you guys and with Stuart?
I find it inconsistent with how we're letting hundreds of thousands cross the border from the South without proper vetting, without a vaccine card, where I can't imagine what it would be to be a border guard or officer right now. My heart goes out to them, but the inconsistency of that contrasted with the paperwork and the resistance you're getting in freeing our, and I'll call them allies, our supporters, our brothers in arms, some Americans, some Afghanistans. But, if an Afghanistan at 15 years old, 20 years ago, joined the effort in his 30s or early 40s now. I agree with you, Robert. He's been fighting, and his family has been supporting it for 20 years. I can't imagine we wouldn't help bring him to safety quickly when we have what's going on at the southern border. That's the part that troubles me.
And
Cathy.
I keep bringing it back to our son. His imprisonment was unfair, undue. As Judge Hines said, he's never seen anything, anyone in prison for something like this. Everyone seems to think that, oh, it's all over. He was court-martialed. He was thrown in prison. He was court-martialed. And gee, the whole thing is over. And they charged him $5,000. And that's not quite the truth. He gave up his retirement. He was in prison for 9 days in solitary. He was fined $5,000, yes. But, there's so much more to this. He still has a gag order. They have not accepted his resignation as they legally said, you sign these guilty pleas and we will give you your resignation. And we're still waiting. How long does it take you're talking about, getting someone across a border. How long does it take to get a signature?
So, thank you, Cathy. Rocco, you've been a supporter, and why is it so important for you to be on this show and to meet the Schellers and with everybody else? What's your point on this?
Well, first of all, we should really thank Cathy and Stu for raising an amazing person with such a high level of integrity. There's really not that many people out there that could do what Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller did, and really stand up to a system that he is going to shut you down. Taking that kind of risk made me step up and say, Lieutenant Colonel, I'll support you. I reached out to him. I said, I'll support you however you want me to support you financially. I'll do whatever I can, rally up anybody in my sphere of influence to get behind you. So I was pretty much behind him the whole time, that from when I found out about it. I think it was in October. I believe it was very close to when he made his first video. So I've been a big supporter of his integrity and what he has stood for, as far as from the military standpoint and from his personal character. Now, he also has another upriser that's helping him out, which is Tulsi Gabbard. She's been very vocal with going after the military, especially the commandant, especially with the new news with the leak out in Hawaii. So she's been very vocal. And the commandant, he's got a lot on his desk now. So with Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller and Tulsi Gabbard, these are two fine and amazing individuals who really are stepping up, putting some fire under the senior leadership that actually has to do something very soon. So to be quite honest with the both of them, something's got to change quickly, very soon, because it just doesn't look good from a military standpoint of what's going on. So there has to be some change, and I'm sure these two will make it happen.
Any response to that, Stu or Cathy?
I have a big response to that. If everything is fair and there is policy in place and your command doesn't come down on you, should be fair. Why is she getting to speak out on social media? Why isn't she in her uniform? Why isn't she gagged? Why isn't she in solitary confinement as of today? I would like to know the answer for that. If fair is fair, and we are following policy in the military, and we are not going by bruised egos and vindictive behavior, why is she not gagged and in prison?
Maybe Tulsi ought to ask the Commandant and Secretary of Navy that very question in uniform on social media.
She has done everything that our son did.
Mm-hmm.
And he has given up his retirement. He has been persecuted. He has been slandered. He has had documents leaked about him. He has been imprisoned, and he has been under psychological warfare. Why are these things not happening to her?
So So, by the way, I admire Tulsi. I admire her moral courage, just like we do our son. But I think Cathy's point is we see inconsistencies. And if we see it as civilians, I am positive there's a lack of clarity amongst service members and officers as to, is it up to my command on how I will be punished, or is there a consistent approach?
Where is the line? What is the line that you can cross?
And since many of you are veterans, I would appreciate you weighing in and helping us even understand it.
Awesome. So Mariela, you're over there because we're respecting you. You know, you're in a secure area. Do you have any questions or response to the Schellers of what they're saying, and what is your significant part on this? Can you comment, please?
Yes. Hi, everybody. Yes, I have the same request and the same question that Cathy and Stuart and the rest here. So they have a different rules for different person, because it is Lieutenant Colonel Stuart have Scheller have some situation why she don't have the same. Also, the most important thing here is who is the person with the responsibility for the 13 brother and sister who died in Kabul. So nobody take that responsibility for that. So that is the most important here. And what happened, how much time Lieutenant Colonel Scheller need to wait for his discharge? So for me, that is the two big questions that we don't have any person who answer this question. So that affects very well the different situation here. You know, as what happened with him, if somebody asks about accountability or something like that, has some punishment, but the other person, the female with the uniform, do and say everything that she wants, but everybody knows that she has some participation in a political party, so she don't have any punishment about that. Thank you.
So, Stuart or Cathy, what is your thoughts about that? Because this show is really geared to you, but you're getting different perspectives, yes, right? That can help you not only for yourselves, but it allows other people to see the insights without even taking away your story. So go ahead.
Well, I would say we are in big trouble as Americans if the outcome or punishment is different, whether you are from a red state or a blue state, or you lean one way or the other. That's a serious problem. And I didn't think it was that way in the military. Maybe I'm naive, but I'm seeing it right before our eyes.
Cathy?
And, you know, if we do want things to change and be more equitable, the military people need to know where the line is. They need to know there's a policy and the policy's followed, and they have to know that it is not vindictive behavior from their own chain of command, whether you're charged or not. In my opinion, I'm not in the military. I'm a mom. I haven't served, you know, but from just outside peeking in, I'm all about, you know, mom, fair is fair. And let's all what we learned in kindergarten, how we treat people, and we follow the rules or we don't. And there has to be consistency.
So, Ben, your thoughts of what's going on. It's going a round table, right? So I know you've been in deep thought. So go ahead. You got the mic. You know, I'll mute myself out of respect. Sure. I'm giving everybody a good turn, you know?
So I think to the point that Cathy just made, we have a lot of double standards right now. And Stu touched on it too. There's a double standard about what's happening at our southern border versus what's happening with our allies that we made promises to in Afghanistan, right? There's a double standard in that people who follow the rules seem to be getting punished, whereas people that do not have any respect for the rule of law are getting rewarded. And I could give 1,000 examples of that from, you know, recent events that have been all over the news, but everybody knows what I'm talking about. There's a double standard for sure. As Stu mentioned, you know, I do think that a lot of this is politically motivated. I think part of it is Lieutenant Colonel Scheller's, you know, outreach got a whole lot of traction and attention on social media. And as they say, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I hate to say this, he made the wrong people, and by that I mean the right people, look bad. There's an old saying in the military that a private who loses a rifle is going to suffer far more severe consequences than a general that loses a war. And in this case, he made it very clear who screwed up and where and why. To speak to Abbeygate, I don't know if this is going to come out in FOIA requests down the line, but multiple solutions to the untenable situation at that gate were presented. Those were 13 unnecessary deaths. And on top of that, we had almost 200 Afghan allies and children die that day too. None of that had to happen. So today, in our world today, we've got double standards that the cost of which is being measured in terms of loss of human life and suffering, not just for Lieutenant Colonel Scheller, but people around the world. I am infuriated by the double standard that we're seeing. I want to say I absolutely love Tulsi Gabbard. I think it's incredible that she's speaking up for him. I don't think anybody on here is saying we want to see her be punished, but she is highlighting that there is a double standard here. And that some people can get away with things when others cannot. And that does not send a good message to our military, doesn't send a good message to our allies around the world, doesn't send a good message to our citizens, our children. The ripple down effects of this are going to go on for a long time.
Well said.
Yes, and I agree with you. I don't disagree with what she's saying. I just disagree with the double standard.
Absolutely.
So I have a question for you. We have a comment for somebody. They're asking a question, and I think it's a legit question. Why is the secretary delaying the closure of the Scheller case? And I'm sure we had that discussion, but if you don't want to comment, that's fine. But I think it's a fair enough question to ask.
Okay. I'll go first. I don't know that we know for sure. We can assume.
We don't know.
They haven't spoken to us.
I have called the Secretary of Navy's office often, and I've talked to a captain of the Navy, and I'm told, you know what, Mr. Scheller, it normally takes 6 to 12 months to process a resignation. And I laughed at her and I said, are you kidding me? You could talk to any Fortune 500 company in America, and if you told the head of HR it takes 6 to 12 months to process a resignation, they'd laugh. Well, Mr. Scheller, there's a lot of paperwork. We don't want him to lose out on any benefits, et cetera. So we don't know. They don't tell us. We have been, and a lot of the callers that have called in have been told, well, it's a legal matter. We can't talk about it. So it's not like we're hearing press releases. It's not like the White House or even our Congress people are giving us updates that are meaningful. We don't know where it is. It's in limbo.
So we can assume that it's punitive. They want to punish him. They want to keep him under a gag order. These are mom's speculations. Number two, I would say they're baiting him and hoping that he will speak out so they can imprison him again and start the process all over again. Number three, it's been sitting in his command this entire time up until this point. It just would sit on every desk and papers would be lost or something wasn't taken out and they made him refile and refile. I think it's a game just to delay things and make his life kind of miserable, or perhaps they don't want to see where he's going to go and what he's going to do in the future. But these are all guesses on my part. But we have asked people to go to I Stand with Stu, and that's stu.com. It's a webpage our daughter put together and has lots of information on there. But it has Secretary Del Toro's phone number, and we have been bombarding, asking Americans to call in and just let them know that Americans care. And they also have the choice to decide if he's going to have an honorable discharge. And after his 17 years of service in the sand, he deserves an honorable discharge if anyone does. But, they can also give him a general discharge with honorable conditions. And, we're just asking Americans to speak up and say, we want this signed and we want this an honorable discharge.
I will say this. The only response or communication I've received from either the Marine Corps or the Navy is having to read Commandant Berger's articles in Task and Purpose, talking about a toxic culture, talking about his 2030 plan, talking about not treating Marines as inventory and treating them like humans. That's the part that
is ironic.
So Rob, thank you. Rob, go ahead. Shoot. You got a question, right?
No, that was.
I'm sorry, Cathy. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean.
No, I don't. I'm done.
Okay. So Rob, go ahead. I want to keep everybody's time respectful. Go ahead. Go for it. You're muted.
Revisiting the idea of, the unfairness of this, right? I don't know how it works in the military. I don't know if there's provisions under the UCMJ for this, but I know in civilian law, we all are granted equal protection under the law, right? So why wouldn't that still be the case here, right? Why do we cherry pick our cases?
Doing 3 things at one time.
They are. It's difficult to understand the administration why they would act that way, but it's not just that particular secretary that we have questions for, right? We have questions for Secretary Blinken as well, right? Why won't we issue letters of non-objection to third country options, right? We can't get through to any of the foreign embassies that are, potentially, great allies to help us get these folks to the place of safety. But because our State Department won't issue a letter of non-objection, they're worried that it's going to affect them politically, and they can't take that risk, understandably. So why would we stand in the way of that? Right? Like, at the leadership level, this is a problem.
Right.
Even if there's good reason, which is, obviously doubtful, but even if there was good reason, they need to explain that. The accountability is what's missing.
Agreed completely.
So, you're hearing from both sides, right? And everybody else, and you're hearing from civilians. Right? What's going through your mind, Cathy and Stu, when you're hearing from different people that are sharing their perspectives versus you getting on the emails? What's going through your mind right now, especially since we're doing it live and the audience is seeing it from your perspective?
We're just being educated. We learn from every podcast, from every interview, we have learned. We were so naive 6 months ago. Seriously, we've learned so much. Go ahead.
I will say the first 30 days, I heard a lot of criticism from people from all avenues. We had letters to our home. We had all kinds of stuff, and people, were very critical of our son, very critical that he broke the chain of command. We don't have that so much now, and that's the good news. Either they got tired, either haters got to hate, and then they wear themselves out, or they are seeing both sides. They're seeing how the military got their vengeance on Stewart, and maybe they're happy with that. I don't know, but the positives and the affirmations have far outweighed the criticisms. And at the end of the day, we know that Stewart's moral courage was the right thing for America at that moment in time. And when I hear things like Ben talk about the extra push it gave them to evacuate another 7,500 folks from Kabul, it just makes me melt. And so we know that what he did in exhibiting moral courage was the right thing. And there will be naysayers out there. And I agree with order and control in the military. You got to have it. But there are times in our history where patriots have had to take a stand, and we're proud of our son.
So that's awesome. Rocco, I'm going to give you the turn up the bat. What is the most important question that you want to be able to share to Cathy and Stu that resonates with your support with Stewart?
My question is did you guys watch the Senate hearings when they were grilling the military senior leaders? Do you think that's an authentic forum, or do you think that's just for show?
Well, I tell you, Stewart was thrown in jail that Monday afternoon, and the Senate hearings and congressional hearings started on Tuesday. I will tell you, I think those Congress people and senators that asked tough questions, their heart was in the right place. I really want to believe that they were upset and angry about the entire withdrawal. Hell, they even asked about Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller. Of course, at the time, Secretary of Defense Austin didn't know who he was.
Wow.
I think he might know now, but the point is, it all goes back to accountability. Who right now, today, is holding our senior military leaders accountable? I have talked personally with senators across the country and congresspeople. I've heard frustration in their voice, especially Republican congresspeople that say, you know, it's a very frustrating job we have right now. We really don't have control. We can ask for updates. We can ask for accountability, but that, as an American citizen, I'm 63 years old. I've never seen this before, where our senior leaders aren't held accountable. They're not stepping up to the mic and explaining themselves. They are, and no one is asking them to. And that is just wrong.
What's sad for me is your son is the one that has to be forced to retire, when in fact, I'd rather see him go on to become a general. And the morons that are running the leadership now should be the ones that should be taking the early retirement. I think it's a major tragedy that he has to leave, because that's the leadership this country and military needs.
Well,
that's sad.
Let me take it out of our negativity and anger for just a moment.
Or yours.
Or mine, Cathy said, or maybe it's just me. Let me say this. I don't think I have to defend Stu's leadership. He's a leader. He will be a leader in the future. Rocco, I have no doubt he will make an impact for us and America in the future in a very positive way. And that's what I'm clinging on to. Yes, I wish he would have stayed in. He loves the Marines. I think he wished he could have stayed in, but he knew early on they weren't on the same page. But I have no doubt that he'll spend the rest of his life making positive contributions for America.
Thanks a lot, Stuart. Mariel, you have a question, and I know you're in an active duty status. What do you have to say about what Stu just said?
Yes, it's a very hard situation because, it's difficult. When we waiting on only for two, like I said before, two only things that is very hard, like Stu say about when he should have his discharge. It's about 12 months that he need waiting, a long time. So it's not easy. So waiting for all this time only because he asked about the life of the brother and sister that die while they do the best for our country. So it's very hard. And the double standard, I say, Ben and Rocco and Robert. So it's not easy for us, for the different person in all armed forces, not only the Marines, because in this is all together. It's all for all armed forces. So we need I hope that very early he got his discharge. I don't sure because it's a long way to that. But the only thing that I'm very sure is that Lieutenant Colonel Scheller, he is not alone. He has a lot of movement behind him, or not behind, near him, stand by him. So we believe in what he did. He is with him 100%. So he has our support. Some of us, we can do public speak about that, and the other can do it for different reasons. But the very American patriot is with him. So we understand all he's doing. Um, we are so sorry for what the situation that he is right now. But he's not alone. He has the all American people with him.
Thanks a lot, there, Ben. Uh, what's you going through, Charlie? You've talked to him. You've done your stuff on your end. You've seen some, you've been on the boots on the ground from a sandbox perspective. What can you share with that, with everybody's thought process?
So, just to be clear, I've never deployed. I actually got out of the Army almost 19 years ago. But just as a veteran, as a father, as a human, I've got to say two things that Lieutenant Colonel Scheller did that just absolutely floored me. And I really want to ask both of y'all as parents what your immediate take was right after it came out. But first of all, he called out the situation. He called for accountability. Which personal accountability has been on decline in our nation my entire adult life. I've been able to watch it. It just, everybody's pointing fingers. Everybody's making excuses. It's led to this whole entitlement mentality. Nobody wants to take responsibility for any of their actions. Everything's somebody else's fault. So there's that aspect. He called that out, which was absolutely amazing. He knew exactly what was going to happen to him. And the very next thing he did was go public and say, my chain of command is doing exactly what I would have done if I was in their shoes. That right there tells me what a leader you guys raised. And I want to ask you honestly, if you didn't know any of the after effect, if you didn't know one life was saved, if you didn't know it rallied anybody to do anything, all you knew was his speech and then what happened, how would you guys feel about him as parents? I'm very curious about that.
Do you want to go?
Well, I said it before, I'll say it again. Proud as hell. It took moral courage. He has always been a very principled man, principled boy. He knew right from wrong. And, I don't know if he was born with it. I can't take credit that it was something that we taught. I don't know, but he always stood up for the underdog. He was a leader on the soccer field. He was captain. He was all state. People loved following him because he was a straight shooter. He was honest and he was tough. He gave it his all. So no matter what the outcome, no matter what the change, and as you said, even if we didn't know a single life was saved, we were afraid. We knew that the world was going to come down crashing on him. In fact, we were in Florida when it happened. And the next day we got in the car, and the next morning we threw everything in the car and we drove to North Carolina because we knew, the fit was going to hit the shan, and it did. And
So when I saw it, of course I didn't know it was going to happen. And it did shock me, but I knew it to be true to his nature. And we're religious people, but my first thought was, I don't, you may not be aware of it, but, I think God just spoke through you, and your life will never be the same. And the people's lives you're going to touch will never be the same. But of course, I had no idea of the storm that was to come. And that was heartbreaking for him and heartbreaking for us to watch. Or I assume heartbreaking for him. It was definitely heartbreaking for me, but very proud of him. We are extremely proud of him. And I probably make him crazy because I like to introduce myself as Lieutenant Colonel Scheller's mother.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
So Rob, from your perspective, what do you have to add to it? You're hearing everybody's perspective, but something that would resonate with the parents. What do you have to share with that?
I would share that stories like Stu's and the hundreds of other compelling stories where there have been opportunities for those not in leadership to exemplify stellar leadership skills has been pretty inspiring to me. I look at his story. I look at the stories of the folks that are putting themselves in harm's way, even still today, trying to facilitate the proper result, which is getting every person that served us in our interest out safely. We're picking up the ball where so many people who are career politicians and bureaucrats are just kicking the can, hoping they can keep it quiet until after the next election cycle, and then it'll disappear. Right? It's so oftentimes what it feels like. And that happens on both sides of the aisle. We've seen it. We've also seen both sides of the aisle come together, especially on this issue, because there is so much of our country's ethos tied to veteran status. They're all walks of life that come together and to make that community. And one thing that they stand together about is the brotherhood of their commitment. And I think Stu exemplifies that, chiefly among others, given the public nature of what's happened to him and is happening to him. So I want to thank you both for raising a stellar American.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
So,
And by the way, this goes to both to you, Robert and Ben. When this is over for our son, and they release him and they sign his resignation, and he goes on to do what he's going to do in the rest of his life, if there's anything we can do to support your organization, now that we understand and we don't like the way veterans are treated and the challenges they face, if there's anything we can do to help your organization, I didn't talk to you about this, but I'm going to put a stake in the ground and say we won't be advocating for Lieutenant Colonel Scheller. He'll do that on his own. But if we can advocate for veterans that need help and need a voice, we would be more than happy to figure out a way to best serve you.
Thank
We
you.
would certainly be honored to have you guys.
so
Yes.
you know, this
Something
is
to think about.
This is awesome because as we talked off stage, right, you were talking about how can you and Cathy support the veteran community, right? And like Robert and Ben and myself, and you got Rocco and Mariel, but myself as well, advocate for veterans and veterans' rights. People don't understand the trials and tribulations that we actually go through to be able to support. And then it takes a content like this to people to expand and share and get different perspectives of people of how they view things, to understand that, hey, there's significant information that is lacking when you have subject matter experts like us to be able to share that, to put it in perspective from a parent's perspective as well. And as you stated, right, Stuart can handle his own, but right now we're just going to be able to hold him up, and when it's time for him to take the floaties off, he can swim or drown, one of the two. So what do you guys say about that?
Mm-hmm. But I would like to go back to what Robert said. This should not be on one side of the aisle or the other. This is an American thing.
Absolutely.
For all Americans. Our veterans are for all Americans. They're not on the red or the blue. I've been saying this is a red, white, and blue issue. We should be able to come together over this issue.
The 1% of Americans that have served and protected our freedoms, they should be honored and fed and housed and taken well care of. And we know that's not the case.
So let me ask you this: coming in the holidays, right? We're talking about this, and we have different perspectives, especially now. I can tell you, for myself, still working for the federal government, I see a lot of different sides and double standards. Now, supporting your son, I mean, what is the biggest takeaway that you can take from this experience that you can share with everybody else as parents, that you view it, that people really don't understand when you handling Stuart's situation?
For me, it is simply depending on if you are a Democrat or a Republican, you see it differently. And that just shocks me.
Breaks our heart.
Breaks our heart. Because if you are watching one newscast, you don't even know what's going on. And if you're watching another one, you're aware of it. And that's a sad, sad thing from the media coverage that we saw when we were children and we grew up with.
Ben, you're shaking your head. What are your thoughts?
The Lieutenant Colonel Scheller's situation, the Afghanistan withdrawal as a whole, has really just brought to the forefront, I think, of everybody's mind. If you do flip through different news stations, we are absolutely seeing completely different things. And sadly, in many cases, every outlet will drop something when they decide it's no longer politically expedient to keep it. And I feel that's what's happened with Lieutenant Colonel Scheller. I feel it's what's happening with our allies in Afghanistan. I feel like it's what's happening with homeless veterans, and a number of other issues where we have these double standards. Outlets just don't cover it. So, Hiram, I greatly appreciate you for giving us a platform here today. I think this is an issue that is absolutely an American issue. I love the way Cathy put that. This is a red, white, and blue issue, not red or blue. And that's the way it should be. And, right after 9/11, all of America felt that way. And we need to get back to that. I mean, there are things going on right now that should not be up for debate. They should not create controversy, yet they do. And I can't wrap my mind around why. I feel like a lot of America has lost its humanity. Its moral compass has been skewed. And I think Lieutenant Colonel Scheller, by his effort to get our moral compass pointed back to true north, ruffled a lot of feathers, and that's why he is suffering the wrath of that double standard now.
Cathy and Stuart, what do you have to say about that?
I agree. I've often thought of that, Ben, that 20 years ago at 9/11, Congress was on the same page. There was unity. Of course, we lost, over 3,000 lives in the towers and in Pennsylvania and at the Pentagon. It was easy and very visible. And I don't understand at the close of this 20-year effort why we wouldn't support our military and support our allies and not leave men behind. But it is what it is. And so it's for brave people like yourself that are trying to evacuate people, the civilian efforts. If the State Department and if the current administration can't get it done, I am confident American citizens will hobble it together and get it done. It's a shame it has to be that way. We need change. I am confident we will have change in the future. We will need leaders in the future. It's time for the next generation to lead. And I think a lot of warriors will come forward.
Okay, I have a question from Lindsay, who's a lobbyist, and she just sent me a text. It says, let me see what she stated. What is your advice going through the same thing in the military? So probably the same double standard. I'm sure that's what she's referring to as far as her question on what is your advice for others going through the same thing in the military. She's probably referring to Stuart's situation.
Well, we have said a lot of 20-year-olds may not have parents that are willing to go and able to get up and do media blitz. They may not have attorneys. There needs to be advocates out there for other military members that feel that they have been treated unjustly by the UCMJ. I don't have an answer to that. We selfishly have focused on our own son. I'm sorry, but I know that there are others out there that need help. And, maybe Flanders Field, Ben, Cathy, and I can put our heads together and figure out how we can create an advocacy for those military members that feel like they've been wronged. I don't know.
Or should we start very simply by trying to work on policy and sticking with it across the board and not just on and retribution?
Yep.
Let me put on mute.
Both great points, Stu and Cathy, both. I think that is where it starts. And I don't think that you guys are selfish at all in focusing on your son. One, he's your son, but two, he's very much in the spotlight right now, and finding a resolution to this situation will, without a doubt, trickle down. However this plays out, it will play out for everybody else.
Hello.
Hey, Robert, explain to people what Flanders Field is all about, because some people have the idea, but give them a synopsis of what's going on, because you work hand in hand with Ben, and that Cathy and Stuart, they really appreciate it. So give the crowd a little bit of knowledge of what's going on. Can you?
Sure. So Flanders Fields is a registered 501c3 nonprofit that was stood up to initially address homelessness and addiction among the veteran population. The day we received that 501 status was actually the same day that Kabul fell. And that is when we knew that it was somewhat ordained that our mission was to encompass more than the domestic effort. It is still a key focus for us, right? Like our main purpose is to make sure that where the VA and the traditional programs may fall short, we exist as that safety net, getting treatment and access and awareness to that treatment out wherever it needs to be, to make sure that no veteran who fought and bled for our country is sleeping on the street. So that is part of our mission. The other part right now, as we work through the bottleneck that is getting people out, is making sure that they're safe, fed, warm, and generally speaking, sustained until we figure out that path to get them out. Because many of them are still in very emergent danger. And, there's a lot of activity behind the scenes. There's many folks out there pushing for different avenues. So as Flanders, we're trying to concentrate on the sustainability piece, while there are many, many folks, striving to get those pathways put in place. We want to make sure that there's still people that we care about at the end of that roadmap. So those two functions are what Flanders is about today. And anyone who wants to support that effort can go to flandersfields.org/donate if you want to make a contribution to that effort.
Awesome. Just put it in the private chat. I have a calling guest, Luis Jimenez, and Luis Jimenez has a question for Stuart and Cathy and probably the rest of it. Go ahead, Luis. You're on. Go for it.
Yeah. I mean, for military justice, you have to be correct. One thing, military justice, there's two kinds of justice. There's the officer justice and there's enlisted justice. Now, when I was in Korea, I seen how court martials are done. Now, when an enlisted soldier gets court-martialed, he will not get the same privilege as an officer. An officer did a crime, similar crime to an enlisted. The officer got 6 months, while the enlisted got 10 years. And it goes through the military. If you look at the military history, how they prosecute people, and you could tell who's there. The boards are rigged. The justice is not equal. If a soldier puts in an IG complaint about his command group being hostile or against or whatever, by the time he goes into the office, talks to the IG, the commander, the chain of command already knows. So it's not a perfect. It's set up the way it is. So there's no justice in there. The only person that figured that out was a young kid that I believe he was I forgot his name. He was court-martialed for keeping secrets. What did he do? He wanted female implants, and he said he was gay. So what happened? Did he go to Leavenworth? No. He read the system, how the system works. Women don't go to Leavenworth. If you look at the Abu Ghraib, everybody got 10 years, and the female only got 10 months. Okay, there's no way. The military justice system is rigged. So the officers know about it. JAG knows about it. They never talk about it. So it's not broken. It's created the way it is. If you look at historical, how these people are being court-martialed, I've seen officers tell officers, look, John, we believe you're innocent. No, I didn't. No, I believe you're innocent. We're going to back you up, even though the guy's guilty. It happened to one of my officers. It was a young kid, was a lieutenant. He fought it. He said it was his fault. And, he wants to take the blame. They kept on telling him, no. Then the major said, you know what, screw you. He got a lawyer. He fought it. He won. And when it came to his promotion, the general canceled his promotion. Why? Because he broke the code. The code was what? Officers come first, and so does the name of the Army. JAG was created for one thing only, two things only. That's a fact. To protect the good name of the Army and to protect his officers under it. That's it. So if you're looking at two different justices, there's two different justices. It's theirs or ours, and we don't exist. That's a fact. Look at your military system. It is not the same. I know for a fact, as I put EO complaints, IG complaints, and I see how it works. So the system is not broken. It's created, built for what it's intended to be. Okay, at West Point, you go to West Point, you teach officers not to trust NCOs. Yes, it's part of the curriculum. Go talk to a kid, go talk to a West Pointer. If you go get 100 colonels who are retired and you tell them, you were a lieutenant, what was your rite of passage? To court-martial an NCO. Now, when you were a lieutenant, you were part of a court-martial. Did you let an officer slide? Yes, you did. You see, it's broken. It's not broken. It is created the way it is. And Congress knows about it. The High Command knows about it. Everybody knows about it. Okay, that's my point of view about justice in the military.
Thank you, Luis. I appreciate it. Cathy and Stu, what do you have to say? I'll let you go, brother. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, that may be true. We haven't had experience with that, but all we know is our son is an officer and he's not getting special treatment for it.
I will agree with his comments on one point. And that is, Cathy and I call it their playbook. Even the process of what they've done with Stewart, they put him in prison saying he was a flight risk. We have read of others that have been put in prison because they claim they're a flight risk. There appears to be a playbook. It is by design. And when they want to crush someone, they go by the playbook. They want to destroy someone's reputation, they go back to the playbook. So yes, I can't disagree with that. As to whether it's different for enlisted versus officers, I can perhaps appreciate that, but I don't have enough experience to say. And as Cathy said, it sure hasn't felt like it to us.
Rocco, since you're a civilian, you're listening to everything else. What is your perspective on hearing all this from different viewpoints? And because you're a guest as well, what do you got?
I mean, it's good to see from a civilian point of view, like what goes on in the military, because without Lieutenant Colonel Scheller pointing these specific deficiencies out, the average public wouldn't know or have a concern in their head without this being brought to their attention. So I appreciate Lieutenant Colonel bringing this to the country's attention, because, you know, we as Americans just think that the military magically, you know, defends our country and operates with the highest integrity everywhere. And, you know, we know that's not always the case. And when people have integrity bring and point out these specific issues, you know, a lot of Americans should really get involved, because a lot of people's lives, you know, these service members put their lives at risk, and they serve a higher purpose, but they shouldn't have to sacrifice, you know, mental health and their benefits for pointing out like things that you and I would think are logical, you know. And more Americans really should get involved and you know, learn about the military, learn about, you know, people who have served in their community, to make sure that these people aren't, you know, getting used and thrown under the bus when their term is up. So, you know, any civilian out there, you should really like pay attention to what's going on. I know it's hard, you know, everybody has, you know, everything that they have going on in their own lives, but still, you know, our country just doesn't magically defend itself. There's millions of people behind the military that makes it operate, and we need to make sure that, you know, they're not being used and abused when their service is complete.
Cathy and Stuart, what, you got any response to that?
Well said. I as Cathy said, 6 months ago, we were going along our nice little grandparent life, going into semi-retirement, and we have been in the front row on the 50-yard line for the last 3.5 months. And oh my gosh, we've learned a lot. And we wish everybody could see what we have seen. I think it would be a catalyst for change if they could.
Marielle, you've been there quietly. Let's go with the closing remarks, because I want to respect the time. We've been in a decent amount. I think we've touched on quite a few things. What's your closing comments, Marielle?
Well, my closing comment is like the same. So we need support all time. Lieutenant Colonel Scheller, they are not alone. They have all Americans with him, with his family. So I hope that very quickly he can has his discharge. And we need ask to know what happened with that document that they don't have signed. Well, the most important thing is he has everybody with them. Doesn't matter the political party or doesn't matter anything. We are together here. So thank you so much to all here. Thank you, Ram, for the podcast. Ben, Robert, Rocco, and Cathy and Stu. So thank you so much.
Ben, you go for it, my man.
Yes, sir. I think the biggest takeaway for me in this entire thing is that when men like Lieutenant Colonel Scheller are fighting to get out of our military, is a sign of a much larger problem in our nation. Men like him should be fighting for our country. And if we've created such a toxic environment that their moral compass will not allow them to continue serving, or that they want to pursue something outside the military, I think we have a bigger issue that needs addressing. This is a huge red flag for a lot of Americans, and he's far from the only one, with his level of command that wants out right now. It scares me for our future.
Ben, thank you very much. I also put your Black Rifle Company as well up there so people can see where you're at, because that way they can follow who you are.
Sure thing, brother. Hey,
Robert, go for it, my man. Let's go. Close it. Drop the mic.
I will. I'll leave it with the fact that if we could convince these leaders in place right now that it's actually in their best interest to resolve this situation amicably and quickly. If you look at recruitment numbers as an indication of the health of our military, it's going to be really hard for recruiters to get folks into new contracts when we very publicly treat people differently depending on their political affiliation, their socioeconomic status, what have you. If there's not an equal protection, then people aren't going to want to join our military, and especially those that have fought and bled for that to earn the right of citizenship along that path, because we're not keeping the promises that we've made to them and their families. So we have more than just the immediate hurdle to overcome. We need a plan of action that takes us forward into a future that has a strong military, because we don't have it right now.
Thanks a lot, Robert. Rocco, you as a private citizen, what are your closing comments?
My closing comments are to get behind Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller. Don't let this case get evaporated into the sea of new news cycles. I know that might be what the commandant is maybe preying on or not, but what happens in the media is that the newest chaos situation buries all decent news that has happened in the past. So we can't let this get buried in the past. As a civilian, you should step up and support your military heroes locally, nationally. Get following this case, because it's important. It should be a really decent precedent for how our military operates in the future.
Appreciate it. Cathy and Stu, I leave the best for last. What's your closing comments? I appreciate your time. I respect it because you are grandparents. So go for it, and we'll take it from there.
Well, number one, and most important, please continue to pray. Power of prayer has gotten us to this point. It has lifted our spirits. It has helped us all shine a light. For any generals, for the Commandant or the Secretary of Navy, if anybody on your staff is watching this, know that we are praying for you. We appreciate you. We appreciate all you do. Let's get this behind us, please, quickly, for your sake and our sake. I would like to thank all Americans for the amazing support. We can't thank you enough. All we know to do is to continue to try to give back ourselves the rest of our lives for what you've given us the last 90 days and our son. So thank you.
And I would like to remind people to go to istandwithstu.com and contact those phone numbers on there. Let's let them know that we haven't forgotten. And I would like to thank all of you for joining us today and continuing our education and to enlightening us, and to thank all of you for your services in different areas and specialties. Thank you so much.
So that being said, I want to thank everyone, especially Cathy and Stuart. It's an honor. We've had a chat. I think it's important to develop a relationship. It's good to look at somebody's social media profile, but to vet them out virtually is just as important, because you have to be like-minded. People can say a lot of things, but at the end of the day, if you don't have the right sauce for that, it's no good. So with that being said, if you like this content of LinkedIn Perspective, share it, like it. This is brought to you by LinkedIn, and it's merely to share personal, professional perspectives in today's events is not to create any form of anarchy. We respect the President of the United States. We respect the U.S. government, but we have the right of freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom to bear arms. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, just hold on. I'm going to end this and we'll talk. But thank you very much. If you like this content, share it, like it, tag it, simplify, always beside you. And Merry Christmas and